Good evening, everybody. May I ask you to remain standing? I'm afraid our chaplain is inconveniently got COVID, and she won't be saying or attending this evening. So may I ask you to remain standing for 1 minute, and we'll replace Linda's presentation with a 1 minute memorial for the people over in Turkey and Syria. Thank you. Please be seated. Welcome members, those in the public gallery and those watching on live stream. I will now hand over to Rachel Edwards to go through some housekeeping points.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Can all those present please ensure that all mobile phones are set to silent? In the event of an evacuation, please exit through the doors on both sides of the chamber, following council staff to the assembly point. As per normal rules, if you wish to speak, please ensure that you raise your hand and you'll be invited to address the meeting. The Mayor has confirmed that he's happy for members to remain seated when addressing the chamber. All votes will be taken via the electronic voting system, with the exception of the budget item vote, which will be taken as a recorded vote as required by law. There is a points document on your tables. If you wish to raise a point, please raise the pink document and address the Mayor accordingly, stating which point you are raising. Finally, I would like to remind members that this meeting is being live streamed, so please make sure that when you speak, you are using your microphone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Before we start the meeting, members will be aware of the informal agreement to exclude questions on notice from members and motions from this meeting. To finalise these arrangements, Council must formally suspend Standing Orders 218, 2114, 18 and 19. If there's no objections to the suspension of these standing orders from this specific meeting, thank you. Agenda item 1. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mayor. There are apologies from Councillor Yalcin, Councillor Over and Councillor Knight.
Yeah. Agenda item 2. I will hand over to the monitoring officer to run through the declarations of interest.
Thank you, Mayor. Members, I have granted a general dispensation for all members should they have any pecuniary interest that enables them to debate and vote on the budget item later in the agenda tonight. Any member who is more than 2 months in arrears with council tax must declare this now, as this will affect your right to vote on the budget.
Agenda item 3. I would like to move approve.
Sorry, Mayor, I need to just finish off.
Sorry, yeah.
Are there any declarations of interest from members this evening which are not already recorded separately on the individual registers of interest? Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Agenda item 3. I would like to move approval of the minutes from the 25th of January 2023. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second those for you.
Thank you. Is there any objections against this? As I will take that as agreed then. Agenda item 4, announcements. I recently had the pleasure of meeting Michael Kighack and his colleagues in the parlour to recognise his long service of 45 years at Westcombe Engineering. Additionally, one of the series of the Mayor's Open Days, which provides an opportunity for people to visit the Town Hall and enjoy refreshments. The Deputy Mayor attended the annual Holocaust Memorial Day commemoration, followed by the Catherine of Aragon service. The mayoral party also attended the vigil in the Cathedral Square, organised by Councillor Ali in support of the Turkish-Syrian earthquake. We attended the Quakers Snowdrop Day, at which over £300 was raised for the Mayor's charities. Looking forward, can I ask you for your support of the forthcoming Kerry evening on the 28th of February, organised by Councillor Ali in support of the Mayor's charities. You will also be shortly receiving information on my final bash, which is to be held at the Milton Golf Club on the 20th of May. Again, your support would be appreciated. Finally, can I say I thank you to you, Councillor Shaz Nawaz, who is attending this meeting for the final time in his capacity as Labour leader. Agenda item 5, Leaders' Announcements. Councillor Fitzgerald, I understand that you wish to make an announcement this evening. Thank you, group leaders. Will you have 1 minute in which to respond?
I think they'll probably do that after I've done mine.
Sorry, I jumped it.
Which is fine. I'm happy that they want to go first, but thank you, Mr. Mayor. So may I first start off by congratulating whoever it was that's got the heating working tonight in the chamber. A much welcome relief than the last few meetings, but don't add that to me time. So earlier this evening, we all took part in a minute's silence as a mark of respect to those who've lost their lives following the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. And last Monday, people came together in Cathedral Square to show solidarity to the Turkish and Syrian residents of the city. I'd like to thank Councillor Ali in particular for helping to organise that with the Democratic Services team so swiftly. I'd also like to thank everybody who attended that vigil on the night or has donated as part of the relief efforts or kept the people affected in their thoughts. There are a number of ways, though, you can still donate money, including local and national fundraising initiatives, and more information is available on the Council's website or from the Democratic Services team. I'd also like to mention the fantastic news that has reached the Council just in the last 48 hours, that we have been shortlisted in the most improved council category at this year's Local Government Chronicle Awards. That in itself is fantastic news. The award recognises the improvement journey of councils that have previously struggled and recognises also that a local authority has, quote, bounced back. It is a real achievement for all our council to be shortlisted, and a testament to the hard work and dedication of staff, plus, of course, the efforts of everyone in the chamber this evening, which has not gone unnoticed or been acknowledged, certainly by me and others. We've come a long way in the last 14 months, and despite unprecedented circumstances, including a very challenging economic climate, we've seen progress in every single area that we set out to improve. We know that we still have some way to go to fully deliver the aims of our improvement plan, but this shortlisting demonstrates that the progress we have made is worthy of national recognition. And one of our panel, Clive, is here tonight, just sat over near Mr. Chapman. If you haven't met him before, I'm sure if he stays around, he'll answer any questions about our progress. But following tonight's meeting, I'm due to write to Lee Rowley, the DLUC Minister, to confirm our progress following the publication of our Improvement Panel's second report in December and the outcome of tonight's meeting, particularly in relation to the budget. I'd also like to mention the recent visit of Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Primary Care and Public Health, Neil O'Brien MP, formerly of DLUC, who went along to the First Steps Children and Family Centre on Welland Road with myself, Councillor Bisbee and Councillor Ayres. The visit took place following the government announcement of 75 local authorities set to receive funding as part of the Family Hubs programme. Peterborough has been awarded £3 million, good news again, and is now developing 3 hubs in areas of the city identified as high need. The funding will also be used to improve access to information online so that more families can easily access that information. At the last full council meeting, I mentioned a host of different funding pots coming to Peterborough from government, including the £48 million for the station quarter development. It got me thinking how much the city has actually received in growth funding, and officers totalled that we have successfully bid for government funding of £81 million plus in the past year to spend on growth projects to improve our city. A fact I mentioned today to the Levelling Up Minister, who I met in Westminster earlier this afternoon, who knows where Peterborough is and is certainly keeping an eye on our progress and is pleased to support us. As I also mentioned at the last meeting, we've also received additional funding to free up more hospital beds and to provide extra support to victims of domestic violence, to name just 2. I'm pleased to say that we've received confirmation, that Peterborough will also receive £600,000 to support even more people with drug and alcohol problems, including those who are homeless. We will keep bidding for extra funding to maintain and enhance the services that we can offer our residents. In further good news, and after some public consultation and lobbying from members of the public who are concerned and some members around this chamber, you'll remember, of course, we used to have spring cleans taking place in previous years across the city. This year, they'll be returning and we'll be targeting areas of the city that need some attention. Further details will be announced in the next few weeks, but clear it's not extra money. We're just redistributing some of the money that Cecilia has found a different way of using. I'm on to the final stretch, folks. This Friday marks the anniversary of the start of the war in Ukraine, of course. This should be a moment to reaffirm our solidarity with them and our unwavering support for the people of Ukraine. A national minute silence will take place on Friday at 11 a.m. There'll also be a vigil in Cathedral Square at 5 p.m, featuring prayers from the Very Reverend Chris Dallaston, the Dean of Peterborough Cathedral, and members of the Ukrainian community. Unfortunately, I can't attend. I had something else in the diary. My colleague, Councillor Allen, I think, will be deputising on that occasion. The vigil will be preceded by a procession from the Town Hall to Cathedral Square with a Ukrainian flag afterwards. A short reception will be held here with stands from charities that support refugees and light refreshments. So please support those events if you're able to. Since March 2022, a group of individuals and organisations from Peterborough have been working with Ukrainian refugees in Gulwice, southern Poland, and on March the 15th, that group will set off again for its 8th trip to Poland, driving out with food, warm clothes and medical supplies. Members of the public, important, are invited to make donations to the group with a collection points based at a number of locations, which you can find details of on our website. And finally, Mr. Mayor, a quick, brief word. I was going to say a few brief words about Councillor Shaz Nawaz. If I was being really brief, I'd say thank you and goodbye. But what can I say? What can I say? We'll certainly miss his dress sense. As I've said, he's the only councillor that gets dressed in the dark. So I would consider that Shaz and I are friends. We are political foes, but we never fall out. We've been friends ever since he's been on the council, and whilst we'll, like all couples, we have the odd tiff, we never fall out, and I wish him well with whatever he's doing, and we will never fall out, and I'm sure other people might echo those sentiments, but I've gone on long enough, Mr. Mayor, so again, I wish Shaz well, and I say that not just from myself, but the whole of the Conservative group respects, and also most of them are your friends. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Group leaders, you will have 1 minute in which to respond. Councillor Shaz Nawaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader, for your announcements and kind comments about me. I too have enjoyed working with you, and I'm happy and proud to call you a friend. We've always had our differences, but we've always sat down, talked about them, and ironed them out. And it's been a pleasure working with you and councillors across the board. I want to echo the same thanks to Councillor Ansar Ali for the vigil for Syria and Turkey. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it because I was on the radio, but it's important we come together on such events, and I'm pleased that another vigil is taking place for Ukraine, and I'm sure it will be supported across the board by residents and also councillors and colleagues. Delighted to hear that we've been shortlisted for the most approved category in the awards. It's a small step to recognise the incredibly hard work officers have done, alongside obviously councillors and other colleagues, to make the progress that we have. And I'm sure you're all as proud as I am, looking back over the last 18 months in terms of seeing how much progress we have actually made. Pleased that the Minister came down and we've got a further £3 million worth of funding, but I think it would be remiss of me not to remind us all that the government have taken a lot more back from us than they have given. So it would be good to see that redressed and balanced in the future. And as always, Mr. Mayor, the leader always brings the spring clean at the right time, just before the elections. I know I'm cynical, I just can't help myself, leader. But it'd be good to obviously see our city cleaned up as best as we can. I know we have constraints on that, but I'm sure you'll all work together going forward to make Peterborough a much better place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some truly horrendous offence in both Syria and Turkey, and our sympathies and thoughts go out to all those affected. And of course, with the anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, those affected also in our thoughts. It really brings into perspective, how lucky we are to be living where we live in this great city. Good news about the family hubs, obviously there to replace the previously cancelled Sure Start centres. Clearly that decision was maybe not as good as it was thought at the time. Good news that we're attracting grants from government, which help replace the government grant that we've lost to our council budget. The annual spring clean can't come soon enough. It seems wherever you go in the city, there seems a genuine need for some care and attention, and we look forward to seeing the detail as it comes out. I am a little bit disappointed to hear that Leader was unable to tell us about the promised extra disabled car parking spaces in the curtilage of the regional pool, which were supposed to be in place before the regional car park was closed. But we will, of course, continue to pursue and make so that we make good on that promise as soon as possible. Turning to my colleague behind me, Councillor Waz, over the years, I've grown to respect.
Be short. Be
short. Okay. I just wanted to say that we will miss his sartorial battle with the leader, a battle which I clearly had no stomach to get involved in. Sorry, did I say I had no stomach? Maybe I should have said something else. Either way, Shaz, it's been great fun, and we hope that you go forward and have good luck in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, could I also thank Councillor Shaz Nawaz on behalf of Peterborough First for his help and his friendship and his honesty when we've worked together. He'll be sadly missed, and we wish him all the very best for the future. Our sympathies, of course, go out to all those affected in Turkey and Syria and those poor souls suffering the hell of war in the Ukraine. All the other news is fantastic, and I thank the leader for sharing that with us. I'm not going to prolong the agony on the spring clean. I too had something to say about that. All I would say is the parkways and main roads that run into our city are disgraceful, covered in graffiti and litter, and I hope this spring clean isn't a one-off just for the elections, and in the future we get to clean our city properly all year round. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Greens are pleased to see Peterborough has been awarded funds to develop family hubs in high-need areas of the city. During this cost of living crisis, we need to ensure we support those that are the most vulnerable. We commend the Mayor on holding a vigil for those affected by the earthquake in Syria and Turkey. And the Green Party wishes to offer our deepest sympathy and support to all those who were affected. We also want to thank Councillor Nawaz for working alongside us as Greens and supporting many of our ideas, and we wish him all the best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 6, questions with notice by members of the public. There's been 6 questions submitted by a member of the public to this meeting. Question 1 from Mark Simlow. Mr. Simlow, would you like to ask your question in relation? Not in attendance. Okay, we'll bypass the EG1 license plate question.
I'm happy to read it out, Mr. Mayor. Do I still read it out? I think I do. Do I?
You can do. It's your discretion now.
Yes, I think I would like you to read out that. Yes.
I was so looking forward to this. I've had to wait 2 months for this question. Anyway, so Mr. Simlow, if you are watching, or I'm sure you'll watch this back, this was a matter discussed at length, by the way, by every member of the cross-party working group on finance. But my response would be this historically significant number plate, which is the EG1, being the first issued for Peterborough. We did have it valued actually in cash terms, about 38,500 from an independent broker. And that valuation was requested by members of that cross-party FSWG working group, who also requested other valuable assets to be put to the test. But it was agreed at the time that the cross-party working group thought it's not in the best interests of the council to sell what is a piece of history, just the same as the mace in front of you, Mr. Mayor, or the chains you are wearing, or the deputy mayor, or the deputy mayoress, or the mayoress. So these things are part of the city's history. Do we go into the museum and strip the walls of paintings and other historical artifacts? I don't think we're quite there yet, because they can never be replaced. So I was anticipating a follow-up, so I'm including some other remarks in the follow-up, which is non-existent. But those are the comments I expected. But happy to always, we should keep all options available about council assets, whether they be buildings, items, chattels, whatever we want to call them. And as long as we're mindful of that. But at the moment, that's the answer I've given tonight for council, Mr. Mayor. And I hope the questioner, person putting the question, will be satisfied with that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to question number 2, if I may. Mr. Hanford. Mr. Hanford, would you like to ask your question in relation to fly tipping across the city?
Thank you. Yes, my question is, fly tipping in the city is on the increase, with the number of incidents and the cost of the taxpayer rapidly increasing. What plan does the council have to tackle this problem that is turning Peterborough into a fly tipping capital?
Thank you. Councillor Simons.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hanford, for your question. This council is totally committed to reducing fly tipping. What are we doing, you ask, Mr. Hanford? We have funding for 5 waste education officers, although this will require full council approval. We are investing in surveillance cameras with good success and prosecutions. We have recently started to name and shame these successful prosecutions. Thank you, Matt Gladstone and Adrian Chapman, for supporting this action. This will be an ongoing policy. We are reviewing our HRC, although I believe it's an excellent facility, there is room for improvement. We are also working with an independent enforcement company. This is at no cost to PCC. We are in discussions with this company to increase their activities. We also recently provided farmers with concrete blocks to help protect vulnerable areas. Rest assured, we take this matter very seriously. Every resident is also a potential surveillance officer. Witness a fly tip, use your phone and report it to us. We will investigate and prosecute as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanford, do you have a supplementary question?
My second question is, along a small section of road near me, which is confirmed as being council responsibility, there are at least 40 plus abandoned items, including large metal A-frames, sandbags, cones, old diversion signs, etc., discarded by Highways England months and some even years ago. They are prolific offenders in our city for not collecting and cleaning up after works are completed. Will the council take action against Highways England to fine them the same way as it says it will do for the public and commercial fly tipping?
Is Councillor Simons prepared to answer the question, because it isn't fully a supplementary?
Yeah, I think
question.
this is a latter question in the list that Mr. Hanford has brought forward. I'm happy to answer it. It's a question that he was going to ask a later item.
Yes, you can answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hanford, for your second question. Highways England have assured me they are looking into this ongoing issue, and I do agree with you, it's a problem. Is it appropriate to take action against Highways England for discarded road signs? I believe it is not. I do believe we all need to work together and get the situation sorted. The spring clean's just been announced. I plan to clear that section of road using some of that money, and then we'll be collecting all them signs. And I do agree it's unacceptable, and we need to work closely with Highways England so in the future this doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3 from Stephen Knight. Mr. Knight, would you like to ask your question in relation to the Combined Authorities Mayoral Bus Service precept? Okay. What do we do?
Discretion, so you can have it read out, or you can just leave it and written answer provided.
Yeah, I'll just leave it then.
Okay.
Okay, we'll bypass this question now. Is that okay, Councillor Seresti, or are you anxious to
What would you like me to do, Mr. Mayor?
not answer
Fine.
the question? Okay.
Absolutely fine. Thank you.
O'Hara. Miss O'Hara, would you like to ask your question in relation to divestment of pension fund from fossil fuels?
Councillor Seresti started each of the climate debates at the end of last year, claiming that we as a city need to act now and we need to make change to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. One of the most impactful changes we can make is to ensure our pensions are invested for the betterment of the planet and our environment rather than the profit and at the expense of it. In fact, it has been reported that having green pension is 21 times more effective at cutting your carbon footprint than changing energy provider, stopping flying and going veggie combined. Towards the end of last year, Councillor Day of the Green Party, with support from Councillor Wigan of the Lib Dems, put forward a motion calling on the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund to divest from fossil fuels. Councillor Coles of the Conservative Party prevented this from happening when he pushed for a number of amendments, namely removing any reference to divestment. At last count, the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund had approximately £80 million of direct investments in fossil fuel industry. If the City Council is serious about enacting change, they should join others such as Cambridge City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council and pass a motion in support of divestment of the pension fund. Councillor Fitzgerald, will you as the leader of the local Conservative Party call for full divestment from fossil fuels of the Cambridgeshire County Council pension fund and urge your colleague Councillor Coles in his position on the committee to advocate for divestment at committee meetings?
Thank you. Before I ask Councillor Fitzgerald to reply, Councillor Hogg has indicated.
I'm just a bit confused that Mr. Simlow's question was answered by the leader, and he wasn't in attendance, and yet you're saying that Mr. Knight's question is not to be answered. I'm trying to understand and ascertain what the difference between the two residents are, that one gets one type of service and one gets a different type of service?
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. So the question was actually given, the question wasn't in attendance. So within 16.7 of our constitution, the mayor has the discretion not to answer the question, and not for the question not to be asked or answered. That's within the scope of the mayor's question, and that's on 16.7 of the constitution. So it's nothing's wrong, but it's the mayor's discretion. In the first instance, there was an answer prepared, and the mayor used his discretion for the answer to be given.
All I'm asking for is a bit of consistency. That, you know, we've got a member of the public that's put a question in to council, and I think that he deserves the same rights that the previous questioner had asked, and I would presume that the question has been prepared for his questions as well.
In response, it is at the mayor's discretion, and Councillor Seresti was given the opportunity to respond, and he asked the mayor what the mayor wanted to do, if I recall correctly.
I'm sorry, Councillor Hogg. May I ask the Councillor Fitzgerald to reply?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just for the assurance of probably members, I'm sure the questioner will get the question answered in writing. He'll receive a copy of the question in writing. In my case, I offered to answer the question and the mayor allowed it. And thank you. And sorry for pausing Ms O'Hara there just for a moment. And by the way, I'm the leader of the council. I'm not the leader of the Conservative Party in here, and I can't do anything other than leader of the council in terms of making decisions for the council, and that's what we all do. There is a difference between what you're asking me as an individual to do. So as the leader of the council, I can do things. The politics we try to keep out as such. But what I would say to you, and I'm pleased you're asking me to answer. I thought you might want to hear more of me, because it's actually my colleague Councillor Cole's portfolio. But I'm happy to answer the best I can for you. So Councillor Celeste started each of the climate debates, as you quite rightly say, last year, because we're taking it very, very seriously. We're putting a lot more effort into this. But the Pensions Committee have in place already a responsible RI, responsible investment policy, that is the culmination of over a year of deliberation and has been the subject to consultation with each scheme employer in the fund and tens of thousands of scheme members. The RI policy is suitably ambitious, lending support to the Paris Agreement, support for a just transition to a low carbon economy that ensures fair treatment for employees and communities that otherwise would bear the brunt of industrial change, and includes the setting of a net zero target. The policy would lead to significant decarbonisation of the fund and significant improvements in climate and stewardship reporting. The fund is taking a lead role in working alongside other funds in the access pool, where the majority of the fund's assets are held, to ensure these RI ambitions can be met. In early 22, the committee agreed plans to decarbonise the fund's portfolio, and the plans are aligned to an appropriate transition pathway and have clearly expressed carbon reduction targets as milestones. The committee's fiduciary responsibility means that the primary purpose of such an action is to manage the climate and carbon risk within the fund's holdings. However, the committee believes that keeping a global temperature rise this century to well below 2 degrees relative to pre-industrial levels is entirely consistent with securing strong financial returns. The committee's approach is one of engagement over blanket divestment of any sector or region. This is entirely consistent with the Paris Agreement and a just transition, as even the most ambitious transition pathways require a fuel mix that includes oil and gas decades into the future. The fund expects each of its investment managers to appropriately manage environmental, social and governance risks alongside financial risks, and constructively engage with the investee companies on any issues identified should these issues not be addressed satisfactorily. Selling or divesting from the individual stock remains an option. Transition to a low carbon economy will not be achieved by simply divesting from fossil fuel companies, which may have limited real world impact. Our appointed investment managers also seek opportunities to support the green transition for example, by investing and engaging with companies to influence change that will make a difference. For example, Ørsted is a company invested in by one of our active managers when it was a black energy company, and which they've supported through its transition to leading a pure play renewable energy company, and now it forms part of a sustainable portfolio. A simple divestment approach would hinder the ability for such portfolio transition to take place and may simply place such companies in the ownership of asset owners who do not act in the same responsible manner as the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for quite the lengthy answer.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms O'Hara, do you have a supplementary question?
The response used to be engagement, and in part it still is, which doesn't work. This was over 4 years ago when I sat in this chamber calling for divestment. At that time, the average investment from fossil fuel companies overall into renewables stood at about 5%. That figure is not much different today. This clearly shows that engagement doesn't work, as I pointed out 4 years ago. This new response from the committee has been its response for more than a year now, and still the amount it invests in fossil fuels is in the millions. It is widely known that if we, as a society, are serious about tackling the climate crisis, we need to move away from fossil fuels. In doing so, there is a major risk of the investments in fossil fuels becoming stranded assets, meaning the value of our pensions is greatly diminished. What assurances can you give that my pension, along with every PCC employee and many others across the county, would not still be invested in fossil fuels to the tunes of tens of millions in the years to come?
I don't think that was a supplementary, but would you?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I can pick out the bones of what was the end of the statement rather than question. All I can say, you asked me for some kind of commitment, and what I'll say is that working with Councillor Day and others who feel passionately about climate change, and many in the Liberal Democrat group do as well, as do many here this side and many in the Labour Party. We're all trying to do the best we can. So if there are some issues that come forward through Councillor Day's committee, for example, specific points that the cabinet member can take back to the board and fly the flag and fight the corner for what this council feels. And again, I'm taking the politics out of it for you. It's not a Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat or Green. This is about what the council wants to do. So all I can give you is an undertaking to keep having the dialogue and explore the options, but they will come through policy, through scrutiny and through members, and members should query what is happening in the pension fund and whether or not what we're doing is appropriate. And there are 60 members in this council that make those decisions. So that's my undertaking to give to you, that through our scrutiny system, we should pose these questions, many of which you've raised tonight, which are concerning. We agree, but slowly we can make change. I hope that gives you some reassurance that we are taking it seriously. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 5 from Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, would you like to ask your question in relation to the council strategy? Do you have something?
No, Mr. Knight. So we don't have to do that one, but I think you need to do the same thing to listen to if they want to answer.
Oh, sorry, I should have asked the. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Sresty.
Does he want to answer the question?
Do you wish to answer this question?
I will be happy to accept your ruling, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
But even if I don't answer the question now, we will ensure that the gentleman gets his answer in writing.
Yes, okay. My ruling is
Mr. Mayor, I do the same with my wife.
yes, okay.
At least it's consistent.
So the answer to that is you don't have to answer.
Thank you,
Right.
Mr. Mayor.
And I believe question 6, it's already answered, correct? Yes. Agenda item 7, petitions. Those presenting petitions this evening will have 1 minute to outline their request. Are there any petitions from the public? No? There are no petitions, so I thank you. We'll bypass that. Agenda item 8A is in relation to the final budget for 2003 to 2004 and the medium-term financial strategy for 2023 to 2026. As per standing orders, there will be no limit to members' speeches for this item. Councillor Cole, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to move this item. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the final stage of what has been an extraordinary journey, one which has resulted in the presentation of a balanced budget for 23-24 and a medium-term financial strategy for your approval this evening. Before I delve into the detail, I'd like to pay tribute to all involved with getting us to this position. The leadership team and officers have worked incredibly hard over the past year to develop plans to meet our financial challenges. As a result, not only are we able to present a balanced budget, but we've made huge strides towards becoming financially sustainable in the longer term. My appreciation doesn't stop there, though. I'd like to extend this to members from all parties who have been involved, and in particular the members of the Financial Sustainability Working Group. This group has met monthly, worked collaboratively, contributed ideas and provided a mostly friendly challenge, all playing a vital role in the process. This budget really has been a truly collective effort across officers and members and includes proposals suggested by opposition groups as outlined in the main report. As you all know, the bar was raised even higher this year. Some might say it's been the perfect storm of events. We've been at the tail end of a global pandemic, impacted on by a war, affected by a cost of living crisis due to the soaring inflation and rising energy prices, and we're still seeing high demand for our services. Despite this, it's a real achievement that we are able to continue to provide good quality services for our residents, with a report setting out how we're going to do that. This budget is focused on managing inflation, keeping a tight control on spending, and managing demand by increasing the levels of preventative and early intervention services that we will provide. But the key change has been the focus on service transformation. In the coming year, we will be supporting people who are struggling the most through a network of community hubs, investing £1.5 million to create a growth, regeneration and economic development service to drive forward our ambitious plans to increase the number of homes, businesses and create jobs. Maximising the financial return and use of our assets and transforming our home-to-school transport service. We know that residents are also facing their own financial challenges, and we wish we didn't have to ask them to pay more council tax. But we cannot deliver a balanced budget and continue to provide the services that people need without including a 4.99% increase in council tax. We recognise that we are now in a much better financial position, but a number of risks remain for us and other local authorities. Some I've already mentioned, like inflation, rising levels of demand, people requiring more complex care and support, and uncertainty around future government funding and reforms. We've set out plans within this report, but we know we now need to deliver these. We've kept a close eye on our budget planning this year, and we will continue to do this. This leads me nicely to the feedback we've received from our residents, businesses and community groups, which has been greatly received. Officers have drafted a response to the public as outlined in Appendix N of the report. We have received almost 250 responses across the budget simulator and the consultation. Although this represents such a small proportion of our population in Peterborough, it's a step in the right direction and an improvement on previous years. We have taken on board the feedback from the joint scrutiny meeting and will look to build on this for next year to ensure we reach more communities. Lastly, I want to end this on the high note that we heard earlier from the leader, that the council has been shortlisted for the Most Improved Council LGC Award. It's fantastic news for our staff, colleagues in the room, and for the council's wider reputation. It really recognises the hard work and transformation which has taken place this year, and in particular, to all of our collaborative approaches with this budget. So to conclude, I'm asking you to provide your approval for this report, which most importantly puts the financial framework in place to enable us to continue delivering services to residents, and will see the council meet its legal duty to set a balanced budget for next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you second the recommendations and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to second, and I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
May I call upon any other speakers? Councillor Hogg. Yeah, would you provide me there? Councillor Hogg.
First up. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank our officers for helping to deliver a budget that takes account of our current financial position and doesn't just deal with the here and now, but gives a plan that can be taken into the midterm. The arrival of our new Section 151 officer and the subsequent arrival of our new Chief Exec and Legal Officer has set a new tone in the Council that is hard to ignore. We now have a structure and work ethos that means we can see a direction of travel in the city's finance, and that is encouraging. There is still plenty of work to do, but this is the team to do it. Moving on to the leader, who no doubt will tell you that this is down to his leadership, and I will surprise you now by saying yes, his leadership has led to a more collaborative approach, and that has seen an unprecedented openness to opposition parties that has been very refreshing, and we hope that this will continue and evolve, and that as time goes on we will see further improvements as the benefits of this approach are realised in the coming months. We are of the belief that this budget that has a strong foundation of the work of our hard-working officers, but with a conservative-led elements. And whilst we're able to see the details and make suggestions that has led to opposition party ideas being considered and adjustments being made to existing items, this budget still has elements that we as a party would do differently if the roles were reversed. Specifically, the scope and extent of road building schemes in the capital plan at a time when it is the stated intention of the city to reduce car journeys by 15% by 2030. This feels like it's flying in the face of that particular goal, and the money could be better put to use for better services for the residents of our city, such as a new regional pool for the city that the city could be proud of, and improvements to walking, cycling and public transport infrastructure. We would also like to see a controlled rollout of 20-mile-an-hour zones in our residential streets, the benefits of which are well known, and the announcement of a countrywide scheme in Wales from September of this year would reinforce that. This budget also lacks proper recognition of the scale of the task to tackle climate change and to meet our carbon zero targets. If we are serious about these, we need to consider large-scale initiatives on housing and businesses, not just transportation. A drive to better energy efficiency and renewable electricity generation doesn't make just environmental sense, but financial sense too for our residents and businesses that all need help. They all need all the help they can get in this high inflation, low growth economy. Regarding the increase in the council tax of 5%, whilst no one in this chamber is eager to increase the already large burden on residents' household budgets, this figure, when compared to other items that households need to deal with, such as transportation, food, utility bills, a 5% increase in council tax represents, in real terms, a reduction to the council finances, and that not increasing would mean substantial cuts to vital council services that simply couldn't be justified. Let's not forget we have to face a reduction. We've had to face a reduction in the council's government-funded support grant of 80% over the last 10 years. While we hear about government grants for the station quarter, the university, etc., please remember that when added all together, they still come to less than the amount of the money that the council has lost due to these decisions made by this Conservative government. It should be noted that we've had a succession of prime ministers and chancellors that have laid waste to our economy and left us as the only G8 country with a small economy, a smaller economy than we had at the start of the pandemic. That all said, the Liberal Democrat group have discussed in depth the budget before us, and we are minded to abstain on the basis that we approve of most of this budget, and those elements that we would change do not require us to try and vote it down. And the consequences to the council of being unable to agree a budget. Should be noted that we are of the same opinion for the last two budgets, but with the administration using the mayor to remove our right to debate in 2021 and some last-minute revelations days before the meeting last year, we had to change that view to one of rejection. Whilst we are content with this budget passing tonight, we reserve the right, as we have done this year, to closely scrutinise the details as they emerge and seek any appropriate adjustments for the best possible outcomes for our residents and the financial stability of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I assume Councillor Cole will take all the questions and at the end, a summary. So I'll go on to Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This year has been a challenging year for us in terms of the budget. The Greens have been part of the Financial Sustainability Working Group and budget opposition meetings and have taken a full part in the process. We wish to thank, as others have, all officers and members who we have worked with on a cross-party basis. We recognise the time and energy put into being able to produce a balanced budget, and we welcome the changes made to improve the governance and culture of the council. We also recognise that there are still challenges ahead. We feel for the first time that our Green Party budget ideas have been given full consideration. These include a £2 million Eco Homes project to fund a flagship development of energy efficient homes to be used as social housing or temporary accommodation. We have also worked on strengthening our Council Tax Exceptional Hardship Fund. Greater publicity will be provided for the Council Tax Exceptional Hardship Scheme, and staff administering the scheme will be advised to exercise greater discretion and flexibility when considering applications. We put these ideas forward in collaboration with Lewes Council after we knew that council tax would increase by 4.99%. We understand that those who need the most help need more accessibility in being able to get it. The Green Party prides itself in not having a whip, and therefore my group will be having a free vote on the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, it's important that I start by acknowledging that this budget is a cross-party budget and not just one put together by the administration. And it's one we should all support as the only sensible way forward if we are going to end up not in intervention. Intervention that would be imposed upon us by this very government that has caused this year-on-year reductions in our grant. This has primarily led to the position we find ourselves in. This budget was only possible because of the real and dedicated collaboration between political leaders and because of the excellent advice and efforts of the Chief Executive, directors, the finance and legal teams, and all officers across the Council. The Leader, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member responsible have, to their credit, been very open and honest about the challenge the Council faced and have worked well with us as a team to find a solution. Whilst politically, yes, many of these decisions the administration have made are theirs to own and they'll be judged at the ballot box for those in May, they do recognise that the only way to resolve this crisis is to work together as they have, and this is a marked change on previous years, which we thank them. Make no mistake, this council was staring down the barrel of intervention, which would have meant everything other than essential services would have been cut, and we, as members, would have no say as to what was done to our city. Add that to an inflation level reaching over 10% and the challenge to produce a balanced budget, with a rise of 4.99% in council tax was still a huge ask, but they have worked together and made it happen. Some of you in this chamber, I understand, despite the excellent work of officers and your own leaders, are considering abstaining or maybe even voting against this budget. But I would respectfully remind you that this budget was only possible as a direct result of cross-party collaboration. So surely you must therefore accept joint responsibility for it, as we do in Peterborough First, and come together as one and vote for it. There's no point in being political about it. Poor decisions such as not voting for a proposal that would have led to a more stable administration going forward and save this council a lot of money in the form of moving to all our every 4-year elections, this doesn't help. But we are a democracy and we at Peterborough First must accept your decision. We think it's a crying shame that many of you voted to defeat that proposal by putting your political party and your personal survival as councillors before the people of this city. None of us wants to see this increase in council tax. But with high interest rates, increasing pressures on services, the continued scandalous low grant levels from government, and taking into account the financial position this council found itself in at the start of the year, and the huge amount of work that has been done to find efficiencies, we must accept that there is no other choice in this budget if it is to be balanced. I'll end by saying this. As fellow councillors, please show you understand the hardship such a rise in council tax will cause to some of your residents. I urge you, or we urge you, to join us and decline, as I did last year, any recommended rise in your councillor or SRA allowances again this year. Not as some sort of political stunt for the election, but to really show you understand and appreciate the struggles some residents are having with high fuel bills and the current cost of living. Please put aside your political differences, take ownership for this cross-party piece of work, do the right thing and vote in favour of this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Imtaz Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by saying this is a good budget. It's a good budget and it's been put together by the CEO, the Section 151 officer and their teams, and put up all together by the administration and also cross-party working. There's been a lot of input. I've been involved throughout the FSWG and I've seen it come together, and I also remember the budget that we tried to pass last year. And the year before I was a councillor, I actually watched online the passing or the just about passing of the budget the year before. So I think we're in a much better position than we were last year and the year before. That almost goes without saying. There are a few buts though. It's a good budget, but cross-party working was only brought in following the improvements panel suggestion. We've always had the opportunity to work cross-party. My colleagues and I have spoken about this long and hard, and I think the administration accept the excellent suggestions made by not just the Green Party but also the Labour councillors and also the Lib Dems and the Independents. And the administration has failed to utilise this expertise since you guys have been in control, and you have to have that period of reflection. You know, we've got no whip on this, and we're not voting for or against or abstaining. We're going to vote the way we feel, but you guys have to take some responsibility for not utilising the expertise that was at your disposal. The other thing I'd say is, Councillor Hogg mentioned 5% not quite keeping up with the cost of inflation, and I completely agree. And I think that's really good that we've kept it at 5% for the benefit of our residents. But at the same time, in the same budget, we've given our own employees a 3% pay award. Who's asking that question? Who's asking the question about whether or not we're happy to allow our employees to have to spend more of their own disposable income in paying their council tax? That's a direct cost. We can't on the one hand say we're being generous to our residents and on the other hand not back our own workforce, our own employees. And I hope that that's something that we can reflect on, particularly going forward into next year. I know some of these items are beyond our control, but we absolutely need to understand the impact of our employees. Situations such as MPS, the Serco procurement process, which we've now brought in-house, and some other practices that we've been guilty of in the past are hopefully a thing of the past, and given cross-party working, we should be in a position to avoid future calamities. We should also mention that we've had budgetary gaps historically because of freezes in council tax. And I know it's been done to death, and I know we've talked about it many times, but we chose to freeze council taxes to make ourselves more politically popular, and we should not have done that, and we need to reflect on that again, because government grants were there to fill the gap for a number of years, and the moment they dried up, and I have to point out it was the Conservative government that pulled the grants, and that's led to massive gaps, which meant we've had to find savings. So all the more reason to congratulate the team on actually closing the budgetary gaps. Absolutely, it's been a fantastic achievement, but their work was cut out given the poor decisions of the past. I'm really pleased with the mention of FSWG throughout this budget report, throughout the appendices, and also in Councillor Cole's introduction, because I truly believe the FSWG was a very dynamic group where lots and lots of good discussion took place. And I see one of the things brought through was the focus on procurement. Unfortunately, focus on procurement's been labelled as a Labour suggestion, and I was hoping I could take that along with me to the Greens now that I'm in a different party, but we'll leave that as a Labour suggestion, and I hope that does get the oversight that it needs to be successful. The Eco Homes, massive win. Don't want to go over ground that Councillor Day's already mentioned. And I hope that's a successful project again, and it paves the way for similar projects going forward. We as Greens have had many successes. The Hardship Fund is an incredible success for us. And I specifically want to bring that out because there's always a lot of support for people on benefits, universal credits, and so on. And it's this middle class or upper working class that tends to get squeezed. We hear it on the doorstep. So this household support fund is an absolute godsend for them. And I want to say congratulations to Councillor Day on bringing that forward. And thank you to Cecilia for actually engaging with the process and actually making that come to fruition. The only other thing I wanted to add was about the MTFS. Sorry, we're going to stop it for time, or there's no time, isn't it? Yeah. You keep going to press the button. I think you're going to call me up. The other thing I was going to say was around the MTFS, the Medium-Term Financial Strategy. This is an excellent document, and I know I've provided lots of challenge to yourself and the team, Matt, in FSWG, and I've been quite challenging and quite abrupt and quite blatant sometimes in my criticism. But actually, the MTFS is an excellent document. It's a really, really good tool for us to use to review quarterly, to challenge and to see the direction of travel. All these bode well for where we're going as a council. And I'm not surprised with the leader's announcement that we are the most improved council. I'm sure, the improvements made to the finances contribute significantly to that. A final thing I'm going to mention is the response to the budget consultation by members of the public. I don't know, it's a 400-page pack, but that section is definitely worth looking at in some detail. Members of the public have given excellent commentary around what they'd like to be improved. The questions were well asked and the responses have been brilliant, particularly around fostering adult social care. And my favourite, some of the recommendations from members of the public on what we do about homelessness, what we do about rough sleeping, what we do about housing, the desire for members of the public for us to look at our housing revenue account and start building our own social housing. It's not something that we as a council can ignore for much longer. So please, can we focus on that? On a personal level, I completely echo and agree with a lot of what Councillor Hogg has said about it being a difficult decision for us to back this budget. But at the same time, Councillor Harper makes a really good point. We have worked on this together. I won't judge anyone for how they vote, but me personally, I will be voting for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I ask Dennis Jones, Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. In the best traditions of the praise sandwich, beloved of those who conduct appraisals, I shall start with the positive, raise some, I hope, pertinent issues, and finish on a positive with a note of caution, which is a clear indication of our voting intentions. The dire financial straits we found ourselves in just a year ago have eased. They've not gone away, and our end of term report shall read must and can do better. I'm confident that not only with continued but improved cross-party working, officer and director involvement, the basket case that was PCC will start to become a dim and distant memory. But why are we here? What led us here? And for my part, why have some of the basic practices common to any organisation in the public, private, not-for-profit sectors been missing in action for so long? I quote, "The financial landscape in which the council is operating has been constantly changing. Peterborough's rapidly rising population means that demand for services has increased faster than the average. The COVID-19 pandemic has built a lasting impact as significant spending pressures arise from built-up demand and increased complexity of care packages came to fruition." All agreed. But one must question the city's preparedness for the next curveball that comes our way. Allow me please to provide a couple of examples, and I'm sure you will all have a clear picture. Key assumptions: pay award 3%. The next line reads inflation in expenditure and sales fees and charges income, a baseline of 9%. The continuation of national strikes across several sectors and the knock-on impact on council services. The budget predicated on a 3% wage increase for staff, with inflation at over 9%, and set to peak at over 10.5% before it starts to recede in the middle of this year, we hope. In addition, we've got the police precept set at £14.94 for Bandy average household, predicated on a 2% wage increase for officers, for staff. How supportive can we be to those in lower paid employees delivering the most vital and often intimate of services to the most vulnerable in our society, both locally and nationally? What is the anticipated effect that we will have on our recruitment and retention? How can we mitigate risk now rather than 18 months' time when we have a recruitment drive and must increase pay as we did when recruiting Class 2 drivers for our bin lorries to ease the problem we had at the time? All due to pay, I know, but a key component, I'm sure you'll agree. I quote, "In relation to the community hub services, the majority of respondents thought residents would benefit most from support with budgeting, market comparisons such as energy providers, insurances, phones and mobile packages. Information on types of help available for all classes, working age children, etc., job hunting, debt management and mental health. This absolutely resonates with those of us involved in the delivery of voluntary services such as debt advice, food banks and food clubs, and supporting those with learning disabilities to complete forms or to get council tax refunds as some sort of us did last summer. It's a hidden service delivered almost exclusively by unsung heroes. I therefore respectfully suggest that enabling such access to advice, guidance and support will be a mission critical to the success and well-being of the whole city, and not just those who are able to take care of themselves. Reducing expenditure on pavement cleaning and fly tipping collection by usage of community services using voluntary services. This is no panacea, folks. Those old enough may recall David Cameron's Big Society. Great that we have the volunteer litter picks such as the much-respected Wombles, but hard-pressed volunteers already do enough. We should not base our budget on unpaid volunteers having to do more in order to balance the books. The council tax base for 2023 was set at 61 million and some other figures, as outlined with a report to Cabinet on the 19th of December. On balance, and it's predicated again by 1,000 homes being built each year from 2024-25, which equates to 700 Band D equivalents. On the balance of probability, how likely is this? And more to the point, what happens if we don't? Yet still we read under the revenue heading, 65% of the council's budget represents debt and social care costs. I'm pleased that Boris was able to stand on the steps of Downing Street to tell us that social care will be fixed once and for all. Heaven knows where we'd be otherwise. 2 prime ministers and a crashed economy later, are we truly any closer to bringing this figure under control, let alone down? Locally and nationally, one hand tied behind our back springs to mind. Under capital heading, the Council recognises the need to invest in the city to encourage economic development and provide vital services such as school places and infrastructure. But these demands must be prioritised within the context of the Council's financial position. Certain schools, such as faith schools, can be built at little cost to the Council. Could this leave us vulnerable as to what we do and with school transportation if these grants are removed, or the distance students need to travel is increased? More cars taking kids to school out of the area? Just a thought for now. Ministers have noted that local authority reserves have increased significantly in recent years and made clear in the funding statement they want local authorities to apply these to funding pressures. The Chief Financial Officer is required to report to the Council on the adequacy of the proposed financial reserves. But we're not a Cambridgeshire or a Hampshire. We are a city unitary authority, and along with many struggling to make ends meet. If this was part of a long-term strategy to wean us off grants from central government, then why does this remind me of the old Western film where the bullets are fired at your feet, making the target dance to avoid them? No warning, but the dance becomes quicker and quicker as the bullets are fired. Did the Conservative administration have any idea this was going to happen in 2016? Did we anticipate having to be in survival mode in 2021, 22? And before we pat ourselves on the back, why has it taken so long to get the basic and accounting and procurement processes in place whilst hiving off contracted services to third parties that clearly didn't work? The recent published 2021 census data demonstrates that with this population in Peterborough having increased by 17.5% since 2011, much higher than the national picture of 6.6%, with this growth not being reflected in our current grant funding allocation. We're still looking for our magic wand, but this one, did anyone predict the growth coming down the tracks? We all want Peterborough to be a great place to live and work, but huge growth in people living here, often in substandard conditions, putting pressure on schools and social services in the process has made our wishes just seem a little bit silly. Where is the balance that sees the train coming down the track in this area and enables us to plan for it strategically rather than to react as we've had to do? Yes, we have a chance to balance the books, and I applaud those who have contributed. But did no one see this coming? The Council must set a lawful budget. As a city, whilst it is irresponsible to vote against the budget and recognising the work that has gone into from all parties, directors and officers, we must surely send a signal out to those who watch over us that we, the people and councillors of Peterborough, along with many other unitary authorities, have had a raw deal. No one has a monopoly on wisdom, and we have and must pull together for the benefit of everyone. I feel close to voting for this budget in recognition of the work that has been put in over the last year, and I know that my leader and fellow councillors are not natural abstainers. I like to think that we are say what you mean and mean what you say kind of people, and abstaining feels like a foreign country, to me at least. There is work to be done at present, too many ifs and buts and maybes to give this budget the ringing endorsement that I sincerely want to give. So I finish as I began by saying the dire financial straits we found ourselves in just a year ago have eased. As a resident, I'm appreciative of the efforts of those involved. As a councillor, I must say that they have not gone away, and our end-of-term report shall read, must and can do better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. May I call upon Councillor Iqbal?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I was not intended to speak, but Councillor Coles, in his opening speech, mentioned about the FSDW. and about the ideas that were shared. I have a different view about the FSDW. The ideas that the opposition presented to the working group were not fully incorporated. So on most occasions, what we used to get is that if we did present an idea, the leader used to say that this idea has already been considered or is in the pipeline. So it was a bit discouraging on that part. However, on the ideas, I remember Nikola Tesla's quote, "I don't care that they stole my idea. I care that they don't have any of their own." What the benefit I think we found from the FSWG is that as a councillor since 2016, I have always witnessed a very hostile and a controlling behaviour in the chamber when it came to discussing the budget. We had councillors from the administration shouting out, putting a person down, not to speak, giving them a shut-up call, which was not healthy. However, this FSDW has established a sort of a common ground where we could sit down, speak to each other, we build that goodwill between each other. It's given us a better understanding to understand each other and working a way forward. And on numerous occasions, many councillors who are here will recall that the administration used to say, it's the Conservatives' budget, it's our budget. You don't have the expertise, the opposition, to give an alternative budget. So on that basis, I think the FSCW has diminished that. Now we could say that we have a contribution towards the budget. And I remembered Wendy Jones' quote stating that an environment that is not safe to disagree in is not an environment focused on growth, it is an environment focused on control. Now going on to the MTVS's key objectives, which are ensuring effective financial planning and management, making the council financially resilient, stable and sustainable for the future, improving value for money, sharing best practice, getting better value from commissioning and procurement. Now, one would say that why wouldn't this be a part of the budget from this day one? Why not? Why wouldn't this be a part of the budget going back 5 years, going back 10 years, going back 20 years? Now, somebody needs to take some responsibility. Who was responsible for making those decisions? There should be some reflection. Who has wronged us? Now, the only concern that I have in this MTVS is the maximizing the income from council tax, business rates, and fees and charges to support the priorities of the council. Now, people are going bankrupt. Businesses are going bankrupt. People are relying heavily on the food bank, and putting an increase will not benefit them in any way. So that's my only concern about the budget at this stage, that this is an area which will affect the residents. Now, we had the opportunity, and many of my fellow councillors will agree with me, that on the canvassing sessions, that when you knock on the doors and people are struggling, and if you share the view that there's going to be a rise in the council tax, they're not happy about it at all. So that's their view about that. Now, does this not fit well with me in a time when there's a cost of living crisis? People are relying on food, and banks and businesses are going bankrupt. So I cannot support this part of the budget. Now, the real point that I like to address is that who has wronged us? Who is responsible for where we are? Who has been in administration for over 20 years? Now, I would say this, and this is a quote I normally use, and I'm sure Councillor Nawaz will laugh about it, that a former leader of the council and a councillor, Councillor Holditch, and I hope he's watching, used to say, we are where we are. We are where we are. I say, why are we where we are today? Who is responsible? So I remember a famous quote of Jonathan Swift where he says, you should never be ashamed to admit you have been wrong. You should never be ashamed to admit you have been wrong. It only proves you are wiser today than yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Answer Ali.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's been very interesting listening to colleagues across the chamber. I'm one of those people, I'm looking forward. I hope that we can learn from the past and move forward and make this city a much better place for those who live here, who want to do business here. I'm encouraged by the fact that the collaborative approach that has been adopted. I'm encouraged by some of the big picture, out of the box thinking that we have. So I'm encouraged by those things. But I haven't had the benefit of a group. I've been independent for a few months now, as you know. And so what I've done over the past nearly 2 weeks, I've been speaking to several members of my community, my residents across North Ward, and saying that we have this meeting coming up. We'll be setting the council tax at 5%, and what are your views, etc. So my decision, the way that I'm going to move forward, is going to be dictated by what people have said to me who live in my ward, who do business in my ward. And many of them feel that over the years they have been let down. The issues that are prevalent probably across the city, but much more prevalent in North Ward: fly tipping, litter, antisocial behaviour, and sometimes when we have enforcement of people begging, drinking on the streets, or rough sleeping in the city centre, they're pushed out by the authorities, and where do they end up? In my North Ward. And people are getting very fed up of that. I've had a couple of conversations with the Member of Parliament and the Leader of the Council to share those frustrations, and I'm hoping that with their support, I will be able to see some significant differences in the quality of life that people living in North Ward enjoy. But as at present, things have been getting worse rather than better. So I'm looking forward to a better future, not just for North Ward, but for our city. And like I said earlier, I'm looking forward to us all working together, not dictated by party politics, not wanting to make political points, but what's best for our city. A city which I made my home almost 54 years ago. So I'm proud of this city. So I hope that we can move forward. Unfortunately, because of what my residents have said, I will be voting against the council tax increase of 5%. But now, having said that, I am encouraged by the direction of travel that we are taking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. May I call upon Councillor Sandford to speak next?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fair to say the council has come quite a long way in financial terms in a relatively short space of time. It's probably worth reflecting 2 years ago where we actually were. I remember at that time we were projecting that in the following year we were going to have a budget deficit of 25 million. And I can remember being at one of our online council meetings, and I actually challenged the then cabinet member for finance, Councillor Seaton, and said, how are you going to, in only 3 months, to close that budget deficit? And I can remember what he said. He said, I have confidence that central government will help us. Okay, so we've come an awful long way since then. I think an awful lot of credit needs to go to our new chief executive and our director of strategic resources, who have constantly maintained a laser-like focus on helping us to achieve the financial sustainability. And of course, we also need to recognise the support that we've had from the members of the improvement panel. Now, I just want to repeat something that Councillor Hogg said. He actually recognised that since Councillor Fitzgerald became leader of the council, he's encouraged much more cross-party working, and I think that's true. I can actually remember the first full council that Councillor Fitzgerald was leader of the council. It was actually held in the serene atmosphere of Peterborough Cathedral, and I didn't see any flashes of lightning or any clouds descending, but there was clear that there was going to be a much more collaborative approach. So I think that's really positive, as other members have said. I do welcome in particular the strengthening of our actual audit committee. This was one of the recommendations that SIPFA put forward. We now have an independent chair, and we have a second independent member who's part of that committee. I recently came onto the committee, having been away from it for a time, and it was certainly refreshing to see the much more challenging approach that the committee is now sort of able to take. I actually do need to say something about the national context there, because that quite heavily influences what has been happening. I think people have referred earlier to the fact that over a 10-year period, we've seen our central government grant reduced by around about 80%. Now, it's probably quite a good thing that central government is encouraging councils to raise more of their actual finance. But there is a problem, because the problem in the United Kingdom is the only means we have of achieving that is through the council tax. Now, the council tax is a very regressive tax, which can actually hit hardest at some of the people who can least afford to pay. Not only that, but it's a property tax, and it's based on the value of not what your property is currently worth, but what your property was worth 30 years ago. And that creates a problem for Peterborough, because when the council tax was brought in, quite a lot of our property was quite cheap. So we've now got a large number of properties that are in, I think it's something like 65% of our properties are in A band or in B band. And in preparing our budget, that gives us an ongoing problem. And it's also been mentioned that we actually made that situation worse by over a number of years, not actually increasing the council tax. So that meant in budgetary terms, we fall even further behind. So what the Liberal Democrats say is that central government needs to, first of all, reform the council tax to make it fairer, but ultimately to replace it with a much fairer and much more equitable form of tax. We need to see a situation where councils have their own sources of funding, but also greater independence of central government control. We should not be constantly having to put bids forward for pots of central government funding and then be subject to threats about what will happen if we don't do precisely as they say. And I think there's one other point that we need to make about central government, and it's particularly the fact that it's a Conservative government, because I think it's a bit ironic that we keep getting lectures on financial competence from the same party that under Liz Truss for 44 days actually came really close to trashing the country's economy. So it seems from them it's definitely a case of please do as we say, not what we're doing ourselves. Now, I think coming and looking at the Peterborough context, I think we need to also remember, as has been mentioned, that Councillor Fitzgerald and a number of his colleagues, who now claim to be the saviour of our finances, are the same people who were sat round the cabinet table and got us into the financial predicament in the first place. And many of the policies that they pursued with such great enthusiasm, such as handing over services to private companies, to trusts and to obscure joint partnerships, are now the same policies that are having to be put into reverse because they have failed. So they need to take responsibility for that failure. Over the last few months, we've seen, and this is quite a welcome thing, we've seen procurement has been brought back in-house. So we can actually apply proper procurement criteria. We can actually say, you know, do we want to give some favour to companies that are actually based in Peterborough? Do we want to support companies that, you know, support our climate policies? We've also terminated the MPS property contract, and we've heard that quite a range of other contracts are going to be reviewed. We generally seem to be coming to the conclusion that some of us have held for quite some time that public services are best delivered by public organisations that are open to open and transparent public oversight. I think that's an important principle. Now, I just want to say a bit about the financial sustainability group, because that's been mentioned. I think, you know, the financial sustainability group is a great improvement on what came before it. We are now getting to see the papers. We're getting to see them, so we have a chance to look through them. And there's actually a certain amount of evidence that even if opposition party ideas are not being implemented, they are at least being taken into account. So that's a positive thing. But we have been told that the Financial Sustainability Group is a good example of openness and transparency. But I have to point out to you that you know, we are being involved in it, but it's a private meeting. And I can think of a few occasions when we as opposition councillors find ourselves at those FSWG meetings being presented with highly critical reports about some aspects of the council performance, but being told that those reports have to remain private because the meeting is private. So I think if the administration was really committed to openness and transparency, what they should do is what Liberal Democrats have advocated, to turn the council back to a system of governance based on committees, so that all of the major budgetary issues that are faced by the council are debated and decided publicly in a public forum. Now, I think, you know, we certainly aren't going to oppose the budget, because we do recognise that quite a lot of the savings that are being proposed are things that officers have actually come up with, and we do recognise that officers across the council have worked really hard to try to find ways in which we can bring about savings without having a severe impact on services. And it's really good that we're not looking at salami slicing all the budgets, but we're actually looking at transformation, so we can continue to bring the services that people need, but not in the same way, but in an improved way. But I do think we have to say that now that we've got the council in a healthier financial situation, we do need to see we do need to press the administration to start to look seriously at some of the issues that are facing Peterborough. We do have a corporate strategy, but it's a very top-line corporate strategy. It's really aspirational. What we need to see underpinning that corporate strategy is clear plans which show what is going to be achieved and by when they're going to be achieved. And we need to ensure that all that we do as a council contributes to our corporate aims and does not work contrary to them. And I just want to quote the example of climate change. On climate change, that there seems to be a bit of confusion as to what our net zero target actually is. It's either 2030 if you look at one council document, or it's 2040 if you look at another one. So we need to sort out that confusion. We know that transport accounts for over a quarter of the carbon emissions in Peterborough. We know that slightly more than a quarter comes from how we live in our homes and things like our heating. We actually know that a major shift away from cars and towards public transport, walking and cycling is required. So actually, as Councillor Hogg said, when we look at the Transport Capital Programme, didn't we ought to see those priorities reflected in it? What we actually see is £21 million going towards major either road construction schemes, putting extra lanes on the parkway, that sort of thing. So am I not right to be just a little bit concerned that that may not be consistent with the policies that the council is putting forward? The revision of our local plan gives us an opportunity to look at how our homes are constructed, but we also need to look at the homes that we currently have. Where in these budget proposals is the major programme of insulation that is going to be needed if we're going to get our homes to net zero carbon? So, in a fast-growing place like Peterborough, there are some clear choices that are going to need to be made to enable Peterborough people to have a more prosperous and a more enjoyable low-carbon future. I'm not personally convinced that the budget before us takes us far enough towards that future, but nor is there anything in the budget that we need necessarily to oppose. So I concur with what Councillor Hogg said, that abstaining is the most appropriate course of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that contribution. And may I call upon Councillor Was to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd just about forgotten about Councillor David Seaton, and you reminded me of him, just like I'm sure members will forget about me in 6 to 12 months' time. But I must applaud all members for the style of debate we're having here tonight, compared to when I reflect 5 or 6 years ago, where we used to have lots of petty personal attacks. And I think this style of debating is much better suited to the role of a councillor. And as the Deputy Mayor has reminded me of Councillor David Seaton, there's a question I used to ask him regularly at the joint scrutiny of the budget, which was that MTFS, by its name, means we should have a medium-term approach. And we always used to talk about next year, and next year alone, nothing about year 2, year 3, and perhaps having an eye on year 4 and 5. And I think it would be unfair or wrong of me not to recognise the approach of our Section 151 officer, Cecilia Booth, for working towards having a balanced budget, not just next year, but in the following 2 years. And that level of work, or the level of work required on that is significant. And not only do you require a significant level of work, but you also need to have a huge amount of courage. Because generally speaking, and I'm sure members here who've been in business or been in employment will recognize that, generally speaking, if you ask somebody why they're doing something, and they'll say, well, we've always done it like this. Okay, and we have that, we're creatures of habit. We always do what we've always done, and unfortunately that means we always get what we've always gotten. The point I'm trying to make here is it's difficult to change the way officers and directors work. And I think Cecilia has done a brilliant job in giving them obviously an opportunity to change the way that they work, but that whole new working way is actually working. And I also want to obviously thank Matt Gladstone for setting a new vision for where the council is going. And although I'm obviously going to be leaving soon, I'm very pleased, seriously I'm pleased, that the council is in very good hands, and I can see that Peterborough will become a much better place. Now, the Labour Party left the previous cross-party budget working group simply because it just didn't work. It wasn't fit for purpose. And as the Deputy Mayor has shared, certain things were discussed, certain things weren't discussed. And I think it's right and appropriate that I recognise the efforts made by the leader, because it has to come from the leader, where he has had an open door policy. And having spoken to pretty much everybody on the FSWG, like you do on any other group, everybody's enjoyed the conversations. Everybody's enjoyed and come forward in sharing ideas, and it's fair to say that every single member on that group has shared ideas, and the leader and Councillor Coles, and I should thank him too, have been open to those ideas, and they have tried their best where possible to either implement or talk about how we can improve those ideas, or have said, let's park them for now and we will look at them in future years. And I think that also takes courage, because it's not always easy to adopt ideas coming from other groups. So we are making progress. And since 2010, I need not remind anybody here that we've had significant government cuts. And those are no fault of any Conservative councillor here or any other councillor, by the way, but unfortunately it is their party that has taken that particular direction. Now, as has been mentioned earlier, the revenue support grant has been cut by nearly 80%. I think 80% means nothing, but when you look at the hard numbers, £43 million every single year or thereabouts, that is huge for any organisation. Most organisations, apart from the really large blue chip ones on the FTSE 100 and possibly FTSE 350, you take £43 million out of their budget, they'll probably go bankrupt because they haven't got the resilience and the ability to be able to cope. And the public have faced years of pain. Officers have many sleepless nights, and I'm sure many councillors here have had to work day and night to support their residents. Now, if any of us had our salary, let's say, cut by 80%, and the same person who cuts it every month or every other month buys us a pint and a pie and a coffee and a cake and expects us to be grateful and gracious for the gift that they're giving us, I'm sure we'd be far from happy, and I'm sure we would not be jumping in joy. The pain inflicted since 2010 has been real, and we've all seen the consequences of that, and Councillor Amjad Iqbal and Dennis Jones and others alluded to that. Now, being a Labour councillor, and this is my personal view, I don't have an issue with council tax increasing, because I know that when council tax increases, we're all contributing towards something bigger and better. And if something bigger and better comes along, I think most people generally in life don't mind paying that much extra. The challenge we have at the moment is it's the wrong time to do it. But I'm pleased that obviously with Councillor Day leading on this, we've had conversations that there is support being offered, and hopefully that will be sufficient to move us forward. And I think, generally speaking, in terms of where this city is, we need a bigger drive in terms of improving skills. I've said this in the past, okay? The way forward really is AI and robotics, and I know we've made some progress towards that, but much more progress needs to be made on that front before we want a strong local economy, and I think that's a strong USP for us. We need better and more appropriate housing, obviously a cleaner city, more opportunities, more support for the weak and vulnerable, and those are the people that we all want to support, whether they live in our wards or not. And I think it would be a lost opportunity, and we'd have failed our residents and it would be a neglect of power and privilege were we not to do those things. It's incredibly important that we do. But what gives me a lot of joy is that the council is making progress with a collaborative approach, and as Councillor Imtiaz Ali said, everybody can contribute something useful. And in the past, there was a certain attitude that opposition members don't really have any ideas, don't really have any experience, don't know what they're talking about. And I'm sure the leader will recognize when he sums up, or at least seconds the proposal, that opposition members have come up with some good ideas, and that working together is a good way forward, just as obviously Councillor Coles recognised in his open speech. Now, it's fair to say that no budget will be 100% supported, welcomed, embraced, approved by opposition councillors. That can never be the case, because if it were, we'd all be in the same party. And the fact is, we're not. So we have a different view on how things should work. And generally speaking, as Councillor Dennis Jones, soon to be leader of the Labour group, said that we all have different ways of working, and generally speaking, in the Labour group, we've always tried not to abstain, and we've said either vote for or vote against, but be comfortable with that. Council or group leaders know that abstaining is not something I enjoy doing. But in the current situation, we've all worked together, we've been listened to, our ideas have been adopted, or some of them have been parked up for future. So I think it would be disingenuous if the Labour group were to vote against this budget, because we've made progress, and if at the 11th hour we vote against it, that demonstrates that we weren't 100% involved, engaged, and didn't believe in the process. And of course we did. So tonight, the best we can do as a sign of progress is to abstain. But I'm sure as the leader of the council and other groups work together next year and in the following years, hopefully everybody will be able to vote for the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. May I call upon Councillor Skipstead to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few things to say. As a member of one of the opposition groups, I can see that this budget has been worked on over a period of time and with input from all political groups, which is definitely to be commended. There were some difficult decisions to make given the financial situation we were in, and care has been taken not to cut services where it hurts the most for our residents. I know from the Green Group that my colleagues have been very active putting forward a number of suggestions to improve the lives of people in this city, and which have been taken on board. And I'm particularly glad to see the hardship fund for those struggling with council tax will be extended to not just people on benefits, but those on low incomes. And that constitutes a large number of people in this city. I'm also glad to see that parties have been able to work together on this budget. But in the time I've been a councillor, which is nearly 4 years, it's taken this financial crisis occurring under the Conservative administration for them to be forced to take on board true cross-party working and cross-party solutions. We would not have achieved the cross-party chairing on scrutiny committees, which we now have, if this crisis had not occurred, and an independent panel brought in to help rectify the mess we were in. And this is a sad state of affairs, as talent and competent people were overlooked for many years when this would have been advantageous to the council as a whole. So although I realise and can see this budget is now as good as it can be in the current circumstances, and that it's positive that parties have come together to solve the issues, we should not forget how we got to this situation. For that reason, I see a need to allow the budget to be agreed, but to also to mark what and who has brought us here, where we were financially bankrupt. And for that reason, I'll be voting to abstain on this budget, as my group has an open vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, may I call upon Councillor Fitzgerald, if you would like to exercise your right to speak as the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot to take in during those discussions, that debate, and all done, as Councillor Nawaz says, in sensible, friendly, non-adversarial terms. But and I'm not going to go on at great length, hopefully, about every single point raised. Just a couple of corrections, though. Councillor Imtiaz Ali is wrong to say that we set up the FSWG following the panel. In fact, the FSWG preceded that at my request in conversation with Gillian Beasley. So just putting the record straight. I just don't like things being reported wrongly. I'll just touch on council tax. None of us here want to raise or increase council tax. But I'll remind you all, when people criticise the history of council tax rises or no rises, so when we do put it up, there's also criticism. Not by everybody, as people say, they understand and recognise. So, we can't do wrong for doing right. So, somebody said you should own up when you make a mistake. I think last year I said it was a mistake to take the money from Eric Pickles. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. So I did acknowledge that last year, and I said so. So I'm not going to start repeating that again. But let me start also with some sincere thanks and a couple of words that came out tonight. So thank you to all the group leaders and all the people that are involved in FSWG, because it truly has been collaborative, and genuinely where things have been brought in, whether it's from Councillor Day, Councillor Hogg, Councillor Nawaz, Councillor Harper, anybody, they have been listened to and either taken forward or a good rationale for why it can't be at the time. So thanks to everybody involved in that. And also, I will also give thanks to the finance team, because Cecilia inherited a situation was not stable, and we managed, all of us together with Matt and all the team working on finance and in the CLT to turn things around. But that extends to every member of the council in terms of wherever they're working, because they've all had to take ownership of the budget in each department. Also, I'd also like to say thanks to the Conservative group, because the Conservative group have had to also accept that times they were a-changing, as Bob Dylan said. So I thank them for their support for me and for the Cabinet and everything else that we've been doing, because it seems to be working, that we're reflecting this positive attitude in the Council of collaboration. But like everybody else, we're not going to agree on everything. We're just simply not going to agree about all sorts of things. The cost of net zero is how much we've been told? 8.1 billion. So we have to work out the financing of it. I think we're all on board with doing it, but we need to get real about some of these finances going forward, and whether it's 2030 or 2040, these things can be ironed out. I echo Councillor Harper's words and that of Peterborough First and their contributions to the budget, and I know Councillor Lane was heavily involved in that. He's absolutely right when he says there has been a change and it's noticeable, and that continued collaboration is key. Now, I also think, I'll tell you what, it's a good job the Labour Party have selected a parliamentary candidate, because I would have voted for Dennis Jones in that political speech he gave about the way of the world in Peterborough. I'm not going to go down that kind of hole. I understand why we do this in the chamber, but for me tonight, this is about budget. But well done, Councillor Jones. As I said, you nearly got me. I might have even signed up to a card-carrying member, but not quite. I will correct him on something, though, about house building, Councillor Jones. It's fact. This city has continued to deliver more houses. We're like in the top 10 in the country for consistently delivering more houses across the board. And that's social houses as well. We've had some glitches when we had COVID, but Marco would tell you, because he was kind of twitching a bit when you were talking about that, because he knows as well as I do that actually we're punching above our weight. So I will disagree with Councillor Jones' political views, as I said, but as fellow Northerners, I'm sure we'll remain firm friends. May I call on Councillor Ali's contribution from North Ward, who I think I heard him say he wouldn't vote against it for the council tax. Well, unfortunately, the two items are interlinked, Councillor Ali. So I'd ask you to consider carefully about that view and show some kind of, the officers will tell you, and I know Councillor Sanford won't agree, that the budget is a council responsibility, not a party's. And, you know, we all need to be as one, but I'm not going to criticise anybody for the way they vote or the way they think. But as ever, Councillor Sanford talks some sense, not all sense. So, again, I'm not going to get into the detail, but to say that the policies and the companies that this council have adopted in the past have failed is just simply not true. But what we should do, and it's good practice, and certainly since I've become leader, is we should examine those relationships, those policies and those companies, and see if they're fit for purpose. Because there have been some spectacular successes with companies that we've had, but times, again, they have changed, and we need to look to the future about how we deal with people and whether or not, you know, the whole world and his wife was outsourcing. Talk to anybody. Talk to Clive over there, Heathy, from the panel. He will tell you that the whole world and his wife 10 years ago were outsourcing everything. We weren't alone in this, but times have changed, and we have to look now at what's fit for purpose going forward. But to say they've failed is not correct, and I could point to many examples of success, but I'm not going to.
Personal explanation, Mr. Mayor.
If he wants to.
I haven't actually got a card to hold up. No,
That's all right.
Could I, if he says that the outsourced companies didn't fail, could I just quote 3 letters to him? MPS.
No. MPS didn't fail. They provided a service. But I have to say to you, in recent times, that service has weakened and we need to review it. It's not a failure. They did a lot of good things. MPS delivered Fletton Keys. They've delivered a lot of projects around the city, but we are in a completely different place now, and we need to look at those relationships. The service delivery may have been needed something better than we were expecting, but I could say to you, Peterborough Limited, Aragon, on the whole, nothing's perfect, is milestone, all sorts of things. I don't want to get into the debate of what's good, what's bad. We can keep those conversations for our secret meetings in FSWG, which aren't secret, by the way. Everything that comes before the council is public. So, you know, the fact of the matter is, we've made improvements, and that's a collective effort of everybody. And can I just say, looking ahead to May, whether I'm the leader of this council, whether I'm not, but if I am, I think I've said to the FSWG group, the kind of approach I've adopted will continue. Now, if I'm not the leader and we're not the administration, I would like to think the same of colleagues, that when we talk about coalitions or, you know, councils where we're more, that we, the Conservatives, are included in that, just the same as I would include everybody else. So we are not going to, the world is not going to be shook up in May. We are going to have similar challenges for the foreseeable future. And we all need to remember that. And I'm saying that's my commitment, and that's not changed from when I was blessed in the cathedral. As my colleague said, my halo had slipped for a couple of meetings, but it seems to have remained intact. So I don't think really, Mr. Mayor, I've got much else to say again, but just reiterating thanks to everybody, members, officers, anybody that's contributed, and let's all move forward positively to try and get this council financially stable and improve services for the people that elected us to represent them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fitzgerald, thank you very much for that contribution. May I call upon Councillor Coles? Would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would. And I just reflecting on tonight's meeting and thinking back to my first meeting, which was our tactical budget last year, and my, what a fractious meeting that was. And if we reflect on why that was difficult, we were trying to deal with some very urgent issues, and Councillor Sanford's quite right. I mean, the gap was huge, and we were throwing all sorts of ideas into a pot, and sometimes information wasn't getting out early enough for colleagues who weren't yet used to this idea of collaborative working in opposition parties. So it did cause some fractious feeling. And to be fair, I was disappointed that the vote was so difficult on that first budget, that tactical budget, which was absolutely imperative that we got through. Moving forward a year, and now look at what we have. We now have a very well-established and well-recognised system in the Financial Sustainability Working Group of a way to deal with these issues and to talk through them, and for senior officers to discuss with senior members in all opposition groups and in the administration a way forward. And I think what's that's shown is that we've actually achieved this. Look at the nature of the debate here. Of course, we all have different ideological views depending on where we stand, and that's all well and good. But when it comes to the important matters, which is of our city and the way that this council looks after our residents, one thing we've got to remember is that the decisions we make and the money that we decide we're going to spend is for the benefit of our residents. And so much of the demand that we have, particularly on the increase in council tax, is to meet that additional £20 million of demands that are going to come in over the next year. Because we are a growing city, the second fastest growing city in the country, again, within the top 5, and we have been ever since I've been a councillor, we have these significant demands that we have to meet. And as we all know, more than 60% of all of the money that we get, we spend on statutory services and on supporting our residents. And just one other comment I would make, which is when we're talking about the support we can provide for our less well-off residents, there was some sort of suggestion that we were just starting on this course of providing support. But of course, if you were to refer anyone to the council's website, there's a whole series of measures of support that are provided, everything from counselling on debt to how to get cheaper broadband, for example. It's all there on the website. You just need to go and have a look. So it's not as if this is something new. But just to sum up, I would say I present to you what is, I think, a very good budget, a budget that's not just for this year, but also projects forward the following year and the year after that, a financially sustainable council. And despite all the risks that we have, we are really on a very strong footing going forward. So members across all parties, I strongly urge you to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. As required by the law, the decision on this item will be taken via a recorded vote. And it's no good saying it's agreed because the law says you have to vote. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, we're now voting on the financial budget 23-24 and the MTFS. When I call your name, please state whether you're voting for, against, or you're abstaining. So first one, Councillor Ansar Ali.
Against.
Councillor Imtiaz Ali.
For. Sorry, for.
Councillor Jackie Allen.
For.
Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor Ayres.
For.
Councillor Barkham.
Abstain.
Councillor B.
Abstain.
Councillor Bisbee.
For.
Councillor Andrew Bond.
Abstain.
Councillor Sandra Bond.
Abstain.
Councillor Burbidge.
For.
Councillor Casey.
For.
Councillor Sereste.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Day.
For.
Councillor Dowson.
Abstain.
Councillor Elsey.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Farouk.
For.
Councillor Saqib Farouk.
For.
Councillor Fenner.
For.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Oh, yes, for.
Councillor John Fox.
For.
Councillor Judy Fox.
For.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Hasib.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Hemraj.
Abstain.
Councillor Hiller.
For.
Councillor Hogg.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
4.
Councillor Iqbal.
Abstain.
Councillor Jamil.
Abstain.
Councillor Alison Jones.
Abstain.
Councillor Dennis Jones.
Abstain.
Councillor Lane.
4.
Councillor Moyo.
4.
Councillor Gul Nawaz.
4.
Councillor Shaz Nawaz.
Abstain.
Councillor Perkins.
4.
Councillor Kayoum.
Abstain.
Councillor Rangzab.
4.
Councillor Ray.
4.
Councillor Robinson.
Abstain.
Councillor Rush.
4.
Councillor Sabir.
Abstain.
Councillor Sainsbury.
4.
Councillor Sanford.
Abstain.
Councillor Seeger.
Abstain.
Councillor Sharp. Oh, sorry. Councillor Shahid, I've missed you. Sorry.
Cheers, thanks for that.
Apologies. That's all right.
Abstain, please.
Abstain. Sorry. Councillor Sharp. Sorry again. Thank you. Councillor Simons.
4.
Councillor Skipstead.
Abstain.
Councillor Stevenson.
Abstain.
Councillor Tyler.
4.
Councillor Warren.
4.
Councillor Wiggin.
Abstain.
And Councillor Yurgatini.
Abstain.
Thank you. Just bear with us while we total up. Make sure we've got the same. Yep. Same. Yep. Yep. Okay, thank you very much, councillors. The results are 33 in favour, 1 against, and there was 23 abstentions. Therefore, this recommendation is agreed.
Thank you, Rachel. That's it. Agenda item 9 is in relation, is the record of the executive decisions detailed on pages 395 to 398 on your agenda pack. The leader will introduce this item and any questions will be answered by the leader unless he refers them to another member. I would remind councillors that they should ask questions on the decisions in a report. All questions should be relevant to the decision itself. Should I feel that any preamble is unreasonably long, I'll instruct councillors to ask their questions immediately. Can members please note that once I have moved on, the questions will not be accepted from the previous pages. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you please introduce this item?
As a table tonight, Mr. Mayor, I'll take any questions as you read.
Okay. Yeah. I will take each page in turn, and could the members please refer to the title of or reference number of the decision when asking a question. Page 395. 396. 397. Councillor Hogg.
I have a quick question just about the electricity contract renewal. I just wanted to know, is this green electricity or is it sort of fossil fueled?
Councillor Coles will have the details on that, being on the ESPO board.
It's not currently all green. There are some green suppliers within it, but the ESPO negotiation is with a number of providers.
Which high? It has. Okay. Councillor Imtiaz Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question on page 397 is on the Lincoln Road regeneration funding of £150,000. Just wondering, is this money going to go towards, like it suggests, the Lincoln Road regeneration program? And if it is, what's the total budget allocated for that regeneration? And how is that linked to the £13 million of funding that was due to Millfield?
Gerald?
Councillor Ali, we'll get back to you with the full details because it's not as simple as this money and the money you're talking about. They're not the same pots of money. But we'll get a detailed explanation of how that breaks down for you, okay?
Okay. Councillor Nick Stanford.
Thank you.
Yes, what do you want?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually wish to go back to the same item that Councillor Hogg just asked this question, because the item on the electricity contract. So in the response that we've had, we've been told that we've got a contract that runs to 2028 that is not 100% green energy, yet the council has a target to get all of its activities to net zero carbon by 2030. Now, I appreciate this is an ESPO framework contract, but what could I just ask the question? If we can't have our own contract that is 100% green energy, then what is the cabinet member actually doing to persuade ESPO to actually go for a green energy contract?
Mr. Mayor, not sure it's entirely related to the actual decision, but Councillor Coles will contribute if he wants to, I'm sure.
Councillor Sanford, well, thank you for the question. The simple fact of the matter is that we need to negotiate on regular spot purchasing of energy and power throughout the time period. So as and when new suppliers come in, they bid into the contract. And of course, you're quite right that we're looking to get a green tariff more and more widely spread in terms of our supply. The real issue here actually is the cost and the fact that we are dealing with really significant price increases if we didn't get into this negotiation at this particular point in time.
Thank you. And 398. Could you? Yeah. Councillor Kimach.
Sorry, it was on page 397, the fly tipping, £5,000. What's that going to do? £5,000, a little bit of a drop in the ocean.
Can we go back on? It's your discretion. Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
not to be obstructive or secretive or not open, I'm sure we can answer that question afterwards in writing because it did come up at Cabinet itself. So I'm happy, Councillor Emiraj, if you just want to drop Councillor Coles a note, he'll get you the answer. It did come up in the meeting, actually.
Yeah. Agreed? Agreed, yes. Agenda item 10 is in relation to the record of the combined authority decisions detailed in the additional information pack. I will refer any questions to the relevant combined authority representative. Otherwise, the same rules will apply as in the previous item. I will take each appendix in turn, and council members, please refer to the title of the decision when asking a question. Appendix 1, Audit and Governance, 13th of January. Yeah. No? Appendix 2, Audit, Governance, 27th of January. Appendix 3, Overview and Scrutiny, 10th of January. Appendix 4, Overview and Security, 23rd of January. And Appendix 5, Combined Authority Board, 25th of January. Okay, no comment. Agenda item 11A is in relation to the appointment of an appeals and planning chair and an audit and health scrutiny vice chair. Councillor Shaznawaz, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
I would, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And following the council meeting in January, where this proposal was made, vacancies have opened up for chair of the Appeals and Planning Committee and the vice chair of the Adults and Social Health Scrutiny Committee. Both of these positions had been previously filled by the senior councillor for North Ward, Councillor Ansar Ali. I'm happy to recommend the appointments of Councillor Alison Jones as chair of the Appeals and Planning Review Committee this evening, and also the appointment of Councillor Shabina Qayyum as vice chair of Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee. And I'd like to add that neither of these positions attracts any special responsibility allowance, and obviously these appointments will be reviewed in the start of the new civic year in May 2024. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you second the recommendation? And either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate.
I'm happy to second, Chair. Thank you. And I'll reserve my right to speak if required to.
Yes. Agreed. Yep. Councillor Shaznawaz, you don't wish to sum up, do you? Yeah, agreed.
Unless you insist.
I don't, yeah. Agenda item 11B is in relation to the change to polling districts, places and stations 2023. Councillor Coles, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I won't detain anyone very long. There are just two changes and an amendment you'll see in the additional information, the supplementary information. A bit of a slip of the pen there. It's to change polling stations from our Youth Community Centre to be assigned as a dedicated polling station, and for the former St George's Community Hydrotherapy Pool, which is now known as 367 Dogsthorpe Road, Peterborough PE13RE, to be adopted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Allen, will you second the recommendations?
Happy to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other speakers? Yeah. Okay. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to? Councillor.
I don't need to speak any further on this.
Okay.
I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Councillor Shaznawaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a small item I wish to bring to the attention, is that the former hydrotherapy pool isn't always recognised by its physical address. So if in all the marketing and literature where we'll be looking to promote polling stations, I'd appreciate if you can put in there that it was the former hydrotherapy pool so that local residents are fully aware.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Coles, would you like to sum up?
I agree with what Shaznawaz says, Councillor Nawaz, so we'll make sure that it is listed as the former. Yeah. So yeah, I will shut up and let the leader pronounce agreed.
Yeah, agreed, yeah. So that's the end of tonight's meeting. Agreed. Could I just say, I've been on the council since 1971, and I am concerned about its friendship between you lot. A real concern that somebody may be moving from that side to the Labour Party, and there might be a rejection there. But may I invite you all in this moment of harmony to the Mayor's Parlour, where I put on some refreshments, drinks especially, and we also have some food. The drinks are free, but the food, if you'd like to do a donation, then we can reimburse the person who's sponsored the evening. Thank you.